A very good morning from fresh and sunny Delphi. This is going to be a warming up of a third day of this year's Delphi Economic Forum. For tomorrow, participants here have been invited for an early morning run along the archaeological site of Delphi. But this morning, we invite you to join us for an energizing and thought-provoking conversation on a value-based union. And this is going to be a conversation with two eminent speakers. One who is born Greek, Margaritis Schinas, Vice President of the European Commission, and another who has become Greek, Victoria Hislop, best-selling author from the United Kingdom. And one thing they have in common is that they are convinced Europeans who in different ways are dedicated to promoting a value-based union and the European way of life. Not very often we have together on stage in an open dialogue a high representative of a European Union institution and an eminent European author. That's why I want to thank you both for accepting the invitation of Europa Nostra, the proud content partner of the Delphi Economic Forum, to join this early morning conversation. Mr. Vice President, I think no other Vice Presidents of the European Commission had a portfolio with a title, Promoting the European Way of Life. In the time that we are living, a Europe that is facing so many emergencies, sanitary emergency, climate emergency, democracy emergency, and now also peace emergency. Is this a mission impossible to promote a European way of life?
Back in December 2019, when President von der Leyen entrusted me with this job, when she gave me the responsibility for this vice presidency, she told me, you will be the most anthropocentric member of my college. I want you to be with people. I don't want you to do money, services, containers. You will be in charge of policies that affect people's lives in Europe. And these two pillars of my work, which is a Europe that protects with migration, security, public health, a Europe that empowers, that has education, culture, sport, youth together, is in a way both the basic components of our model of society and way of life, but in these difficult times, it can also become a shield, some sort of a European armor, a protection that makes us believe that we can be more autonomous, more resilient, more independent. And in these 2.5 nightmarish years, we proved that this is possible. The vaccines, the certificate, the recovery plan, and now the unprecedented packages on sanctions, the fact that we have bought armament with EU taxpayers' money for Ukraine, all these are unprecedented steps that we are taking, and this prove that this is not mission impossible. The European way of life is not just a slogan, it's not just a soundbite, it means business. It's a substantial element of action there, of a Europe that acts, not a Europe that analyzes.
And this is a major change comparing to what was happening in the past. So it was deliberate. This emphasis on people is an extremely important emphasis that the new Commission, now the Commission of Ursula von der Leyen, has insisted on.
Yes. As you know, I had also important responsibilities in the Juncker Commission. And there also we faced many, how should I call them, mini crises. There was a sequence of mini crises that hit the Juncker Commission. But this was nothing compared to the science fiction political parameters that we're asked to deal with in this commission. I mean, if you would have told us in December 29 that, first you would have a pandemic and then a war, it would be totally unbelievable. It would be something like a script, a Hollywood movie script. But this is what we have been facing with the last 2 years and a half. And I think, as you said, with some success, with a degree of delivery that has surprised people, and especially the many doomsayers and the Cassandras that were predicting, you know, Europe's demise and that Europe will go belly up and it's over. Well, it's not. It's not. Europe proved more strong, more resilient than many would have thought.
Victoria, as a European citizen who has two passports, now a blue one, the British, and the red one, the Greek passport, which you showed proudly 2 days ago when you had your own conversation with Margaritis Purnera. How would you, as an author, define what it means, the European way of life?
Well, I think it's really interesting moment for Europe and for Britain and their relationship with Europe, because suddenly we do really feel we are part again, because we're facing, you know, we faced the pandemic and now we have Ukraine, the tragedy there. And I think this is the moment when you realise that Europe is we are a family. And although we've officially left the Union, suddenly we do feel absolutely with Europe. You know, there was a sense for a few years that we were just walking away. And I think almost overnight, you know, on the 24th of February particularly, we felt this is something that we are facing all together. In terms of the way of life, I mean, it sounds quite nebulous, but I think I can bring it down to something that's very much part of my own education. It was a state education, a free education, but I was extremely fortunate because we were taught languages, and at school I learned French, Spanish, German, and since then Greek and a little bit of Italian, and that's opened doors for me. And I think it may not be the way of life, it may not define the way of life, but it defines how you can walk through doors to enjoy that way of life. And being here in Delphi, there are so many first languages, but everybody speaks, you know, a second language, which seems to be English, fortunately for me. And I think that sort of sense of family, and yet we do speak different languages, is very strong. And I would urge all people of influence here who have anything to do with education, you know, to make sure that young people are, you know, they are tomorrow. That's who's going to be living this way of life that we're discussing slightly theoretically here. That young people need to be educated in the sense that they are part of this much bigger family. And that's my fear for Britain, that we've narrowed down very much in our education system. And I believe that's why the vote went as it did in 2016, because many British people simply didn't regard themselves as European at all. And they didn't recognise the influences on, you know, literature, music, art, sculpture, you know, all the things that are, you know, make us human. They didn't have that in their hearts, in their brains, in their education. So I think we always need to look behind us at who's coming and make sure that we are promoting this way of life to young people.
No, thank you for stressing the vital element of education. At the opening session of this forum, Patriarch Bartholomeus made an incredible video message shared with us. And among other things, he said, societies may not thrive unless the intellectual and social values as well as humanistic traditions are respected. Mr. Vice President, has the European Union done enough in the past to indeed emphasize the fundamental role of those shared values? And will perhaps all these crises boost that emphasis in the future?
Yeah, I thought it was this French philosopher and writer, Rémi Brague, who had said that our values explain not only who we are, but also what we have become. So to be able to see the trajectory of the European Union, one has to start from the ashes of World War II, where winners and losers of the war found a way of putting together a basis of something that has become now the biggest and better regulated single market in the world, the second world currency of reference. So in Europe, in the ashes of World War II and in the ruins of the Berlin Wall, we managed to reconcile history with geography. And this, I can assure you, Cessna, did not happen in a political vacuum or in a values-free environment. This happens because the continuum of the way we think, we cooperate, we value life in Europe has been uninterrupted. And what are these fundamentals? Well, we are democracies. We protect our minorities. The role of women is guaranteed in the family, in society, and in the workplace. We are the world champions of human rights, world champions of privacy and data protection. We have universal systems for health and education. We take care of our elderly, and we do not have the death penalty. Pieces of this puzzle you can find elsewhere too. All this together, you will only find in Europe. So if someone is looking for a more practical way of defining the European way of life, very much along the lines of His Holiness, I think that's it. And if you want also an image, a snapshot of this, is at the height of the Arab Spring in Tahrir Square. I will never forget a young woman with a scarf in the middle of the protest, addressing herself to international public opinion in a CNN camera and saying, all this is because we want to live free. We want to live as they live in Europe. She didn't say the US, Australia, Canada, at least Russia or China. So we are becoming the world's epicenter of good governance, of democracy, of values. We are not yet aware of that, probably. Some of us consider this is given, it has always been like this, but I can tell you that the rest of the world recognizes this as a major European achievement.
As somebody who was born and raised in Belgrade, I can tell you
Absolutely.
that outside of the European Union, and the European flag stands for the values first and more, not just for money. And that's why this is extremely important that in the future it is also going to be more emphasized. Wars are the negation of all these values that Mr. Vice President just mentioned. In your books, Victoria, you have chosen to tell some human stories about some human dramas, tragedies, traumas related to wars in this country, but also in Cyprus. I have here the Sunrise, where you focus on the city of Famagusta. Do you believe that indeed your books and similar books that are talking about such episodes of our shared history are helping to sort of overcome the wounds of war and so help rebuild the bridges between the communities affected by these events?
It's obviously something that's not measurable to know whether the reading of a work of fiction can create that effect. One hopes so. I certainly don't think they would do the opposite, because my novels are translated into probably 40 languages now. I think what I'm doing is definitely telling untold stories to countries that, you know, perhaps didn't, certainly in Britain, I think very few people who weren't alive during the Second World War would have had any idea of the terrible suffering that happened in Greece. I mean, our education system is so Anglo-centric that young people didn't know that, you know, Greece was even occupied, that it had a Nazi occupation and a famine, and the country was stripped of resources and gold and practically everything that was valuable, nor about the Civil War. And to tell those stories can only, they're not setting out to horrify the reader, but they can only make the reader think, this should never happen again. You know, certainly, for example, Civil War, nobody benefits from the Civil War. It simply devastates, divides, and leaves terrible scars and bruises. I mean, it's an inadvertent role to play a sort of anti-war writer, but I think anybody that writes, even Tolstoy himself, anybody who reads War and Peace would, you know, be of that opinion. It's impossible to write about war without, you know, effectively implying that this should never, never happen. And my stories very often focus on what is happening within the family and to women and children, because that's quite often the untold side of war in a history book, where you know the numbers of soldiers, battles, how far they advanced or didn't, and how many military losses, but you don't always think about what the effects were on the women. I think we're very aware of it with Ukraine because media has changed. We see a lot more as it's happening. You know, we've seen women and children fleeing their cities, and it's sort of more vivid. But I think some of the wars of the past didn't have that, and I hope that's a gap that I sort of plug with my novels.
We have now this horrible war and images of the war from Ukraine. European Union, Mrs. Schinas, you mentioned, is supporting in various ways, but not only giving the weapons there, but what you see that Ukraine has submitted the application for becoming a member of the European Union. So they see that, again, you know, linking by what you just said, as a shield. And we have the Western Balkans, again, their aspiration to become, already for many years, members of the European Union. There again, in that process, could we not imagine having a much stronger emphasis on the values? It's so much more than money that the European Union can bring to these countries. It is helping democracy and rule of law.
Clearly, again, if one takes a macroscopic view of democracy and values, something that was a privilege of few countries in Western Europe in the 60s, in the 70s, has become an expansion towards the Mediterranean South, and then later there is a democratic arrow that starts from the Baltics, goes through Central Eastern Europe, and has reached Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia. Let me put it bluntly, this is a war that we have won already. The war of democracy and freedom has already been won, and we are on the side of the winners. And what's happening now in Ukraine, in essence, is more of a democracy issue than a security issue. It is our model of society that has reached the gates of Russia, that has never been governed under democracy. And they consider this as a threat. It's not NATO or security arrangements. Deep down, it's an issue of democracy versus autocracy. So I have no doubt that when the moment for a settlement comes, and the moment will come, a peace settlement, one of the fundamentals of this final settlement would be that Ukraine would be recognized as a candidate country to join the European Union. I have no doubt in my mind. Probably NATO and other security considerations would be left on the side, but there is no doubt that the Ukrainians, with their bravery, with what they have been doing, they have earned the right to be part of the family, and they will be. And yes, it's a triumph of Western democracy, but this is a battle that will not stop in Ukraine. You know, autocracy versus democracy is one of the fundamental cleavages of...
We have it in the Western Balkans.
You have it in the
well.
Western Balkans, and I'm delighted that most of the players in the Western Balkans are with us in Delphi today and tomorrow. That's a very positive sign, and let's hope that Apollon will inspire everybody.
For more harmony.
For more harmony, democracy, and understanding.
Speaking about Apollo, we are here in Delphi. Yesterday, we organized a panel entitled The Spirit of the Place. And we organized that, Europa Nostra, as the European Voice of Civil Society Committee to Cultural Heritage with Elenike Taria, dedicated to the memory of a great European from Greece, Costa Karas. And we spoke about this importance of this place, but the importance of our shared cultural heritage, which is part of these values that are at the fundament of the entire European project. Victoria, I think you have attended also that but what do you think is the role of this shared cultural heritage for promoting a more peaceful Europe?
Yes, I mean, even the place of Delphi, we're all very lucky we're here, and probably everybody feels it. It has a spirit in itself. You know, when we visit such a place as Delphi, I think we're all affected. You know, if this wonderful event was being held in a sort of big conference hotel outside or near the airport in Athens, it would have a completely different ethos, a different feeling. And I think place and, you know, physical monuments such as Delphi, you know, do inspire. You know, it's a sort of an intangible thing, but as you know, human beings feel something when they go to certain places, and I suppose beauty is part of it. There's an inscription at the site, Gnothi se afton, know thyself, and it inspired me to write a story a few years ago, which has just been adapted for Greek television. And in it, in my story, a young woman realises that she doesn't know herself. And I love, you know, this is a very Greek philosophical instruction, and it's something that we should all do. But that comes from a moment of experiencing culture, of seeing something, of feeling something, and then, you know, connecting it with your own life. So, you know, cultural heritage, the protection of the beauty of somewhere like Delphi, everywhere such as here is a unique place, and there's nothing more important, really. It's part of our sort of heritage in Europe, and we should never allow anything to destroy such beauty.
Thank you so much. You have used 3 times the word beauty in your response, and that is exactly what we need more talking about the beauty, about the tangible heritage, but it includes the landscape, because in this area I think you have all seen the beauty, and I think we will be walking also around the ancient parts. Mr. Vice President, this is exactly one of the 3 objectives, 3 values that are at the basis of the new European Bauhaus. An initiative launched by the President, Ursula von der Leyen, in September 2020. She surprised us all, including us from the cultural world, when she said we need to build a more beautiful, more sustainable, more inclusive Europe, and we need to give a soul and a cultural dimension to the European Green Deal. That was, I can tell you, in our ranks of the wide field of culture, we felt that it was a revolution going on at the European Union. Can you tell us a little bit about? And I remember in Venice when you joined our summit in September last year, you gave wonderful contribution, and you said we have 3 E's. We have the values with 3 E's: ethical, aesthetical and ecological. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, you just stole my soundbite. I was about to say the same thing.
It just impacted us so much.
I take this as a compliment. Let me put it differently. This whole idea of a European Bauhaus is bringing together the environment, architecture, and work. This is the essence of it. And bring it together in a way that makes sense, that is harmonious, that is aesthetic. And that's what the president announced, and that's what we're now trying to put together. I want to be very clear that I don't see this as a top-down Brussels model that will be imposed urbi et orbi across the European geography. I see it as a model that can be spelled out in different forms in the north, south, east, and west of Europe, building on the specificities of geography, mentality, society. But let me finish by coming back to this place. Bauhaus may be something that sprang from the German society between the wars, but the first Bauhaus was here, in Delphi. This was, if we are in the European Union, this at the time was a Hellenic union, where representatives from all city-states had permanent representations here. It was an amphictyonia. They were around the temple. And Apollo, the temple, the Pythia, the advisors, it was a broader ecosystem that was bringing together religion, politics, ethics, work, and this outstanding scenery, this environment. So that was the Bauhaus of the time. Let's now, to use a Hislopian term, get the thread and link it back to modern times. I think we can do it. It's a passionate, it's an exciting operation. I think we'll make it.
Definitely, it has arisen a lot of hope, indeed, that in all the policies of the European Union, these values of more beautiful, more sustainable, more inclusive Europe, it's something which has to irrigate all policies. I use the word hope. Victoria, when you spoke 2 days ago, you said that in your books, though you are speaking about traumatic times for the characters in your books, at the end you always feel that you have to end up with a note of hope, a note of light. In these dark times that we are living, we have just heard here a lot of feeling of hope with Mr. Schinas as the leader of the European Union. Is there hope as you see the light?
Yes, I think as human beings, we all ultimately we're not designed to hate. We're designed to love. You know, if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't
Antigone
be here.
said that. Antigone is Sophocles.
So I think kind of love and caring for each other it has to underline everything that we do, and that should be very much part of the European way of life.
And for the end, Mr. Schinas, last night when we have a conversation, you mentioned a line that you very much like. I won't say it myself, but there is a famous singer that you very much like, a line that he said about Europe. Tell us, about how we can further, what's your final message for promoting this value-based union that is so dear to our heart?
Yes, probably that's, as everybody knows, Cessna knows all my lines and sound bites. No. But graciously she allowed me to use this. I think it's very appropriate to round up this very interesting discussion. You all know Bono, this Irish singer of U2, who said that Europe is a thought that needs to become a feeling. I would have liked to have said this before Bono, but you know, he came with this choice of words, which is exactly what we need now. That's exactly what we need. Make Europe from something which is in our mind to something that's in our heart.
It's a perfect end of this wonderful conversation. I want to thank so much Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Margaritis Schinas, and best-selling and lovely author of Victoria Hislop here. Thank you.